This will probably be my least professional video I've ever made on YouTube, but I wanted to give you behind the scenes on how I was able to develop the Flying Toaster screensaver for macOS 10.4 and 10.5 Tiger. So this is going to be a breakdown of my development chain. If you watch this entire video, you'll understand how to develop retro OS 10 software, regardless if you really know much about programming. I don't have a script for this video, so I don't want to ramble too much, but this is my PowerMac G4 I bought used. It's a dual 1.4 gigahertz G4 with the maxed out RAM. Not a lot to say about it. The nice thing though is I have wired Ethernet on it, so that way it's very fast on the network because these things have 1 gigabit Ethernet. That's quite fast for these things. The next thing I have is my Mac Pro. This is my current desktop and soon to be retired. I assume whenever the M5 Max comes out, that's what I'll get because it's at the end of the life. But that's not important. But this is my desktop setup that I use for most things. Despite my fairly chaotic looking desktop, I put a lot of time and care into this setup. Even though there's a bit of a mess back here with the cables, I did organize it. I made a video about it using the LTT cable organizer, and nobody watched it. No one cared. So I'm not going to talk about it. It just used to be worse. I have this wireless mouse and keyboard, and this is a big deal. This is kind of a crappy keyboard, but the big thing it has is Windows and Mac layouts. You can change the hotkeys right here by pressing these buttons. This is great for using with, of course, the mini PC and this Mac over here. What I do when I need to use a wireless keyboard and mouse, I just always have it connected to this USB hub from Belkin, this old-timey one, and then I just plug this dongle into whatever computer I need. Okay, I think you get it. I have two computers. So let's start talking about the actual software development setup. All right, the first thing we need to do is wake up my G4. This thing's noisy, but if I tap on this and then turn on the keyboard, it turns on. You're not going to hear it because I have voice isolation mode on. Now, there's one other little piece to this. It has a very long DVI cable that comes all the way to here. The nice thing is I can video capture it directly, or I can plug it into my main display. Before I switch to screen recording mode, I want to highlight one more thing. So check this out. So that's the G4. And as I showed you before, there's a USB dongle. Now, if I go to QuickTime and I select New Movie Recording, look, that's my PowerMac G4. Of course, I can't interact with it with this mouse and keyboard, but I can operate the computer with this mouse and keyboard. So when I wiggle this mouse, it wiggles that. There's a bit of a delay because that's a USB capture device, but it is what it is. This is good enough. I am now on my Mac Pro looking at my PowerMac G4, and I'm using screen scaling turned up, so it should be easier for people to see. This is the direct HDMI output from the PowerMac G4 into QuickTime Capture. To interact with it, I need my secondary mouse and keyboard. But through the magic of screen sharing, we can just use one mouse and keyboard to make this a lot easier. VNC isn't always ideal because it's not the smoothest screen experience, and we'll see that when we start animating a lot of stuff on the screen. It's nice to always have the HDMI capture as a backup because it is smoother even if it has a delay, and the PowerMac doesn't need to be attached to the network in order to use it, making it a lot better for troubleshooting. Modern development tools are a lot better than what you would find in the PowerMac G4's ecosystem. So what we're going to use is modern macOS to do our development and then just build the code on the PowerMac G4. So first I need to mount the volume on the PowerMac G4 so I can use it. From the PowerMac G4, we need to make sure that file sharing is enabled, which it already is. For some reason, when trying to connect to this, it can be a real jerk. Watch this. But we can connect to this through the Finder using Connect to Server. Technically, the PowerMac G4 does support SMB, but it's the old version. So instead, we're going to use AFP to connect to this computer. Now that we have the correct protocol and the correct IP, we can click Connect. AFP stands for Apple File Sharing Protocol. And just stating the obvious, I am punching in my username and password to sign into my PowerMac G4. Then I'm presented with my many volumes on my PowerMac G4. I'm going to connect to my public folder as that's where I've stashed the code for this project. I'd actually recommend not using this folder, but that's just what I did. Now I have this mounted as a network device where I can interact with the code on the computer. This is my folder with all of my code, so we'll just double click in there and we can see all the things I have.
Normally I'd set this up with Git, but we're just messing around, so we're not going to do that.
Actually, I lied. We'll come back to Git near the end of this video.
But the nice thing is I can now use this folder in a modern code editor. So that's what I have over here. And you would just go to Open Folder, and we'd mount this folder, click Open, and guess what? Now we can look inside here and see everything that's going on in my project. Now this is where it's kind of key. Vibe coding only works to a point. I already had a working screensaver. That way I was able to backport it to 10.4. So if you have code, it's better off almost to do mockups, a functioning version in a newer tech stack, and have it translated. But I have ChatGPT right here with Codex. This is the most vibe codery way to do this. If you have the Pro subscription, you get this. You can integrate it into VS Code. So watch what happens. We can see some of the things that I was working on. I will ask for something like, can we improve the, oops, it helps if I spell right, improve the scaling. And we'll see what ChatGPT says. And I'll speed this up through the magic of editing. Now it's asking me questions. The rendering looks a bit off, and I'll show you what I mean. Now I need to go back to my screen sharing connection to my PowerMac G4 so I can look at the preferences and see the bad rendering. Right now, my bad rendering occurs in 3D mode. 3D mode adds scaling, so some objects are closer to the user and some are further away. If I do a test, for some reason the last frame is blurry. VNC is just not designed for full screen refreshes. Just for a sanity check, I'm going to look at this through the HDMI connection. So that means going to QuickTime and looking at my screen capture. We can clearly see that I have a problem. Back in VibeCoder world, it's asking us follow-up questions, which is a good thing. Rather than just try and squash that one bug, I think I want to rethink how I'm doing the rendering engine because it's right now on the CPU and we could get better performance if we used OpenGL. The fact that I know that OpenGL, Open Graphics Library, is an option that I can use in retro Mac OS is just tacit knowledge. AI is not a replacement for knowledge, and a lot of people try and make it that. You shouldn't use it for knowledge seeking, as I know for a fact at some point during this project, I will be gaslit by the AI. The reason why vibe coding works is because programming should be deterministic. LLMs can lie and bullshit you all they want, but if your code doesn't compile or it errors out, it is wrong. A compiler or a runtime is the ultimate fact checker when it comes to AI. And of course, the better developer you are and the more you understand about technology, the more effective you will be. Personally speaking, I am a full stack JavaScript developer who prefers functional programming. This makes me aware enough to know what I don't know. Through this tutorial, you'll see me using strategies based on this principle. I don't know OpenGL and I don't know Objective-C. Now, the one thing you do need to know if you're going the route of vibe coding is version control. This is going to be probably the most sage advice I give during this video. Learn Git. You should at a core level understand what merges are, how to resolve conflicts, how to create feature branches, pull requests, everything. This will let you be more effective and more freeform when you vibe code because you can always just re-roll. Now that I say this all out loud, I'm going to add Git later in this tutorial. But first, we'll continue what we're doing. Now this is a weird one. While this was vibe coding, it lost the ability to write to the files. So on my PowerMac G4 for this folder, I'm going to give read and write access to everyone. And I'll have to apply this to everything inside this folder. Now I'm going to go back to my LLM and ask it to continue now that I've fixed my permissions. As a vibe coder, you're more of a project manager and troubleshooter. All right, now it's resumed and working and doing its thing. Jumping to midstream because this is something I wanted to call out because if you notice us clicking on these things, I get curious to see what it's doing. I don't know much about pixel pipelines, but I have a base understanding, so we can see that it's enacting NS OpenGL context, and then we can go here and see what that looks like down here as it's making the textures. Very cool stuff. Also, understanding how to effectively use your queries is going to be a big deal. You don't usually want to one-shot something. That is just a terrible plan. But if you start small and keep adding and iterating, especially if you have that Git strategy mastered, you can get pretty far. The reason why we need this computer so much is that your modern Mac cannot compile PowerPC code.
What I have on this computer is Xcode 3.0 because that works in macOS 10.5 Leopard. I found that on Apple's website. It's still up there in their developer section, and I'll post a link to where you can find those. All right, and on my AirPods so you can get a sense of the noise of this guy while it's on. We can hear the fans going. You don't need something this nice to do this. You could get away with this lowly iMac G4 because most of what we're going to be doing is using the desktop over here to run the IDE and the development toolchain other than code compiling.
All right, it's done vibing out, and so we're ready to compile. As previously mentioned, this is a port of a screensaver I already wrote for modern Mac OS. I'm a bit of an Xcode newbie, but I do have a pretty good understanding of the CLI, and I'm used to downloading open source projects and having to self-compile them using CMake. So when I started this project, I created a CMake file, then had AI assist me. Now, I don't want to derail this video with a breakdown of Xcode versus CMake, but Xcode is Apple's IDE with a build system. For the Vibecode developer, you probably want to stay out of the Xcode space, especially for Objective-C, which is what you use when you're writing for old Mac OS. Plus, you can always graduate to an Xcode project when you want IDE debugging while keeping the CMake as the source of truth. You can get really lost in the woods in this discussion, but CMake is not a compiler, neither is Xcode. CMake is a build system, and Xcode provides one as well. Now I can go back to my PowerMac G4, where I have a terminal open to my project directory. I am going to run my sudo make command, and we will see if this compiles correctly. All right, we can see it did not compile correctly because we see an error 1. This is not a big deal or even surprising, but what we do need to do is copy and paste all this terminal output and send it back to ChatGPT Codex so it can fix it. In newer versions of macOS screen sharing, you can share your clipboard and copy and paste directly out of your shared screen window into your other Mac. But in this version of macOS, we can't do that. So a workaround is to have a secondary text file open that you can just copy and paste into. Then I'll save it and close the text file, then go to VS Code and open it so I can copy and paste it. Then I'll paste it into the Codex window and let it do its thing. But we can actually improve this because we can connect our terminal from VS Code to the PowerMac G4 by using SSH. Under the system preferences, under sharing, we need to make sure we have remote login enabled. Normally with SSH, what you would do is write SSH in your terminal, then your username for this computer is me at, then followed by the IP or domain. Now, if you run the command, it won't work and it'll fail because of the lack of modern security protocols. But we're Vibecoders, so we can just Vibecode a solution. Watch this. I told Claude Code my problem and then copy and pasted the error I received. It returned to me a shell script, something that I can run every time I want to connect to this computer. So what I'm going to do from VS Code is make a new document, copy and paste this into it, then I just need to save it and give it a name with a .sh suffix. I'm going to name this add ssh support.sh, and I'm saving it in the root of my project folder. If I punch in ls, I can see a list of all my files and I see my sh script. To run the script, we just type sh space the script name. I've started typing the name, so I'm going to hit tab to auto-complete it. I've hit return, we see a security message, which is expected, and I want to select yes. I'm trying to punch in my password and it's not working, but I noticed something here. See if you can spot it. I'll give you a hint. It's before the IP address. If you spotted it, don't spoil for everyone else, but here I'll explain. It says its username is user, and if you remember from before, my username is me for this computer. So I just need to go into my script and change my username to me. All right, I've done that, and I'm going to run the script again. Now I'm connected to my PowerMac G4 yet in another way, this time through SSH, which gives me full terminal access. I need to navigate into my project folder, which is located in my public folder. If it's not apparent by now to be a successful Vibecoder, you do need terminal skills. You don't need to be an expert, but you just need to have the basics. All right, let's run our sudo make command. Then let's go back to our VNC connection and look at our screensaver. Now you'll notice something strange. My .saver file is not current, and that's because it did not overwrite the file since it already existed. We'll come back to how to compile so it does write a new file. For now, we can just trash the .saver file, then from the terminal, run the make command again. Now for the moment of truth to see if this actually worked, and I don't have high hopes, but I'll just double click the .saver file, and then I'll replace my previous screensaver. A quick aside about modern Mac OS is it will cache the screensaver into a system process, whereas on old Mac OS, it won't, so this is all you have to do to replace the screensaver. Things aren't looking so good because when I try and run a test, I don't see anything. As a vibe coder, our best friend is error logs. OS X has a convenient application that lets us view log files. It is located under Applications, Utilities, and its name is Console. I'm already seeing what looks like the error, but let's make it so it can read the whole thing. I've hit gold because I can see that System Preferences 1165 is logging invalid drawable. And you probably know what I'm going to do next, which is to take this back to our LLM. Remember when I had the whole thing about LLMs being great for coding because of determinism? Well, this is that in action. Through the magic of film editing, the LLM is done, and we need to run the make command, but we don't need to delete the .saver file every time. If I go to my make file, I can look inside it, and I see that I have a make clean command, and it says it will remove build artifacts. This will do the dirty work of removing our previous build. Remember when I said that thing about being terminal savvy? Well, this is one of those where it comes into play. We're going to run make clean ampersand ampersand, so we can chain a second command here, make build. Now when we get a build error, it's much easier just to copy and paste it from this terminal into our codex window. After about 2 rounds of doing this, I got it to build cleanly. And I've double-clicked to install my .saver file to overwrite my previous screensaver, and I'm looking at it right now. This is a very strange bug because it's pretty apparent the toasters are being rendered at a lower resolution or blurry, and the toast is being rendered at the correct resolution. However, this is about the best possible outcome because I get to show you another key vibe coding debugging technique you can use. OpenAI Codex and Claude Code can both read images. So rather than just describe the problem, we can show it the problem. Using my HDMI capture, I've recorded a video clip of the misbehaving screensaver. I just need to find a frame that works pretty well, then I'll copy it. I'll do this just by hitting Command-C in QuickTime. Then from macOS Preview, I can turn this copied frame into an image by going New from Clipboard. LLMs seem to do really well with JPEGs and PNGs. We'll want to save this into our project folder. I'm going to be lazy and just save it into the root. I'm naming it error.jpg. As the saying goes, a picture's worth 1,000 words, so when I'm back at the LLM, I can instruct it to look at that JPEG file, then provide a description of my problem. And my prompt isn't even that descriptive. Now, this did not fix my problem first go around, and I had to rinse and repeat this multiple times. And goddammit, wouldn't you know it, this is where the LLM tried to gaslight me. The sprite asset was a .gif. The toaster animation frames were .pngs. I was very suspicious because .gif files are quite a bit more simple than PNGs. They only use LZW compression, their index color, they only have 1 bit for alpha. Again, an LLM is not a replacement for having tacit knowledge. This is something I just know because I'm a UX developer and I'm a nerd. And yet the LLM sent me on a wild goose chase about the resolution of the PNG files. The LLM had me upscale the images to 256 pixels by 256 pixels. Of course, this didn't work, and it looked like it was downsampling the 256 by 256 pixel image down to 16 pixels like before, and then upscaling it. And what inevitably fixed my OpenGL renderer was using .gif files. I was correct, even though the LLM insisted this was not the issue and that it wouldn't fix it, and I had to instruct it to do it anyways. This is how I created version 0.02 of my Flying Toaster screensaver, which now features OpenGL acceleration, and you can download it today. Before I close out, I want to come back to version control. A very common and very, very valid criticism of LLMs is they don't do the best project organization. So far, the entirety of my screensaver pretty much exists in one really long file. The problem is that one giant file with 1,500 lines of code becomes pretty hard to digest if you're a human. And it's also a problem if you're a LLM because of the context window. Constructing your project of multiple small files that are well organized, preferably using an architecture strategy, makes it easier to interact with your project. If you're a programmer, you could refactor this yourself, but we're just going to ask the LLM to do it because, again, we're vibe coding. Refactoring can be a huge pain in the ass, and you could potentially break your project doing this.
This is where Git comes into play, and I'm not going to go into how you install it because there's plenty of tutorials that'll tell you how. The easiest way is through the Xcode command line utilities.
I already have it installed, so I am going to create a new Git project by using git init. Then I'm going to make my first commit by adding in all my files before I start a refactor. This video is not a Git tutorial. The point here is I want to reiterate that since we're on a modern computer using a modern toolchain, we get modern utilities like Git.
And because I know how the internet inevitably works, someone's going to point out that Git is 20 years old. And yes, it is, but the only person who had been using it probably 20 years ago was Linus Torvalds. In this entire video, I've been working with a pre-existing code base. You're probably wondering, how do I start a new project from scratch? And remember what I said about iterative design? That is the way to do it with working with LLMs and agents, because they are not going to nail things in their first shot. The best thing to do is to try and start with the scaffolding and give it your project parameters before you start really digging into the meat of it. If you're generating a screensaver, you would say something like, I would like to generate a hello world screensaver for Mac OS. And then you can start tacking on the type of features you want. That is how I started with my original version of the screensaver.
For this quick demo, I'm going to use Claude Code, which is a different tool just to show off different tooling options. So I have a blank folder, going to open that. It's my project. Yes, I trust the authors. And then we are going to use a new terminal. I already have Claude Code installed. We just type Claude. Because Anthropic makes Claude Code, it's a little different than OpenAI's Codex. So from here, this is where we type our messages rather than a separate tab in the left-hand corner. I've already written a prompt in advance, so I'm just going to paste it into Claude Code. Again, if you're starting a project like this from scratch, it's best to aim low. I generally know the tech stack I want and the infrastructure. With tech stacks that I'm very familiar with, I will not waste my time and tokens having the AI set it up. Instead, I would just install Next.js manually. This is where I'm going to plug something I've been working on, and don't worry, it's not something you can buy, it's completely free. I've leveraged what I've learned about macOS screensavers and turned it into a framework, but it's only for modern macOS and not retro macOS. I'm actively developing it, and I want to add better particle support and metal acceleration. There's a lot of stuff in there that I don't want to drag down covering, as most people probably aren't interested, but you can use it to build the DVD logo that bounces around and changes color. In fact, the demo's in the project. I've also included a recreation of the classic Windows Starfield screensaver. It's good for coders and vibe coders, so check it out if you're interested.
Now that that's out of the way, I hope people are getting the point of this video, and that is that you can leverage modern tools and modern utilities to develop retro software and make your life much easier. The cool thing is the barrier's never been lower. I'm not particularly a great programmer, nor am I particularly smart. I just happen to be aware. And I think through this video, I can help spread that same awareness to you. While I'm on the topic of barriers, I think I need to repeat once again that you don't need a particularly nice retro Mac. Almost any will do or retro computer, and you don't need a super nice modern computer. Anything modern-ish will do, and you could do this from Linux or Mac OS or probably even Windows, although there would be more friction there, but it's still doable. This is a hobby that you could take up for relatively little money.
Before I go, I want to remind everybody that you can download for free the Flying Toaster screensavers that I made for PowerPC macOS and for modern macOS. And I'm also working on one for Snow Leopard, and that'll be up on my Patreon as well. You don't have to subscribe, it'll just be posted there, and the links will be in the description. So I want to thank all my Patreons who recently joined and started supporting me because of this flying toaster stuff that I did. This will probably be my last screensaver video for quite a long time. But there will be more screensavers to come. Just look for them on my blog or Patreon. Thanks.